Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. Maybe you could give me a thumbs up if the sound seems good. Great. And you probably have seen I've been putting something in the chat. I'll do it again for those of you who just arrived. And in just a moment, we'll begin our practice today doing the chant we often do at the beginning of our Sunday morning programs. These are the Buddhist words on the practice of the divine abodes, these four beautiful emotions of loving kindness, compassion, gladness, sometimes translated as appreciative joy, and equanimity. So let's go ahead and begin with our chant. I'll just post it one more time for those who just arrived. You can open up that document if you'd like. Otherwise, you could just listen along and join in when you feel like you know the words well enough. So now let us make the four boundless qualities shine forth. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with loving kindness, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with compassion, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with gladness, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with equanimity. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. So take a moment. See if it isn't possible to feel at home in the experience of the body, that we don't have to be in conflict, don't feel like we have to fix or manage, but instead maybe it's possible to peacefully coexist with the experience of the body. And we establish mindfulness to the fore, which is just this simple but profound recognition that this experience, whatever it is that's predominant now, that this experience is being known. So we could say it's an awareness of what the mind is knowing, or that the mind is knowing. It's an awareness of that. Awareness of the present moment. What's here and now, what's being known. In the Buddha's instructions in the Anapanasati Sutta, he invites us to be aware of the experience of breathing in, to track and be aware of the experience of breathing out, and to bring enough interest, enough sensitivity to this physicality of breathing in and breathing out, to simply discern if the breath is a longer or shorter breath. So attentive enough to just sense the quality of that particular in or out breath. And remember, that's not the same as asking us to control the breath or make it a particular way. We're just observing this natural process of breathing in, breathing out. Even if it feels controlled, we're not intentionally trying to make it any particular way. And of course, to commit to this exclusive attention to the simple experience of breathing in and breathing out means a really important letting go of all the other phenomena that the attention might attend to, because we're choosing just to attend, to keep in mind this process of breathing in and breathing out. We're letting it become the most important thing. And there's a real pleasure in this simple attention to this experience of breathing in and breathing out, and feeling more and more secluded from everything else, because we're cultivating this exclusive, relaxed attention to the physical process of breathing in and
You don't
breathing
have to.
out.
I can sit there. It's fine.
And with more continuity, you might notice the breathing process becoming more refined, more simple, maybe shorter. And so the breathing process itself begins to reflect the mind and body becoming more settled. But again, we're not forcing anything or trying to make something happen. And here the effort is mostly about cultivating at this time an interest in this exclusive experience of that breathing in and breathing out, and simply allowing everything else to be in the background. And in a sense, there are two objects that we're aware of: the physicality of breathing in and out, and the pleasure, the inner pleasure of this secluded, simple presence with the breathing process. And now the Buddha invites us, while breathing in, to experience the whole body, and while breathing out, experiencing the whole body. And it's really just a background, foreground shift. Of course, the sensations of the wider body were already here in the present moment. But we're cultivating this more inclusive attention, as we cultivate this more full and inclusive sense of the whole body as we're breathing in, this whole body awareness as we're breathing out. And with this practice we're doing now, we don't have to zoom into those places in the body where there's painful sensation. Rather, have a more inclusive totality of the whole body as you're breathing in and breathing out, including all the neutral sensations in the body. You might even sense this healing quality of the knowing mind being interested in the totality of the body with each inhalation and then with each exhalation. There is definitely something healing about this inclusive presence with the body. Everything belongs. Nothing has to be rejected or fixed or denied. And with any of these particular instructions, if you feel like the mind could use a little word or phrase to keep the instruction in mind, then just coordinate that repetition, that saying of that word or that phrase with the in-breath and out-breath. So here it might be experiencing the whole body. And you could repeat that phrase as you breathe in and as you breathe out, if it helps, if you need it. Otherwise, continue doing the practice in silence, internal silence. Breathing in, letting the body be. Breathing out, letting the body be. And of course, we'll move ahead with the instructions because we're learning the map. So the next step is to recognize the calming effect of this whole body awareness. So the Buddha's instruction is breathing in, experiencing this calming of the body. Breathing out, calming the body. And it's more about recognizing the sense of bodily calm as you breathe in, and recognizing any sense of bodily calm, bodily well-being as you breathe out, and keeping that bodily calm, bodily well-being in mind with each inhalation, each exhalation, even if it's somewhat faint. But by keeping it in mind, you'll notice that it deepens and widens, spreads through the body. Just by keeping this calm, bodily calm in mind and appreciating it. So again, it's really a practice of being interested in what the Buddha is inviting us to be interested in. So now we're interested in bodily calm through the duration of of the in-breath. And then interested in bodily calm, bodily well-being through the duration of each exhalation. And it's important to understand we don't need a different bodily experience than the one we're having. We work with the experience that's here. The more we experience and trust that bodily calm with each in-breath and out-breath, the more it will be possible to experience that joyful interest, that buoyant quality of the heart and mind, sensing that everything is happening on its own, and lightness. So for the fifth instruction, the Buddha invites us while breathing in to experience joy, and invites us while breathing out, experiencing joy. So this takes some confidence in the possibility that joy is available right now. I'm interested enough to keep it in mind, to keep the experience of joy in mind as I'm breathing in, as I'm breathing out. Sensing how the moment, the quality of the moment feels alive, in motion, unfixed, and in that sense, light or buoyant. As if every aspect of our experience was this simple, serene, beautiful smile, that kind of uplifting quality that a smile has. And I think of this as a courageous move to keep joy in mind as we breathe in, to choose to keep joy in mind as we breathe out. And simply allowing everything else to be in the background. Brightness of the joy, and notice a more resonant ease of the heart, happiness or ease, contentedness of the heart. As if the heart is willing to shed some of its defensiveness, its armor or tightness. So the Buddha invites us to experience this ease of the heart as we breathe in, and to keep experiencing this ease of heart as we breathe out. And just doing our best to keep this ease in mind as we breathe in and out. The ease of contentment. And there's some real tranquility with this ease, which is sometimes experienced as a sense of not needing to move both the physical body, but maybe more importantly, just this inner sense of being held. Breathing in, experiencing ease. Breathing out, experiencing ease, keeping it in mind. Then again, we practice stepping back. So instead of abiding in this ease, we're breathing in and we're aware of the ease, aware that ease is being known. It creates a little sense of space. Aware of this mental activity of ease being known. And of course, there's other mental activity, other perceptions and feelings, feeling tones being known. So this next step, this would be step 7 of the Buddha's 16 instructions. The Buddha invites us while breathing in to experience all of this activity of the mind in the same way we cultivated an inclusive awareness of the whole body. Now we're cultivating an inclusive awareness of mental activity. So with each inhalation, in this dispassionate way, just aware that this mental activity is being known. Don't need to be entangled. It's just mental activity, thoughts, perceptions, feelings, whatever it is, being known. And then again, with each exhalation, just aware of this mental activity in this spacious or dispassionate way. And there's a real pleasure in being present with all of this mental activity, but not caught or not pushed around by the different thoughts, the different feeling tones, the different perceptions. Just mental activity being known. And with this step, we want to be especially interested in the underlying feeling tone with these thoughts, these emotions, or whatever it is that's being known. Just that it feels like this, pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. So we're learning to be okay with all this mental activity. It's actually a real insight that mental tranquility isn't dependent on there not being any thoughts or any perceptions or any mental activity. And of course, it's precisely this dispassionate presence, awareness of all this mental activity that's coming and going that leads to it quieting down. So the eighth instruction, the Buddha is just inviting us to notice that quieting. So while breathing in, noticing the quieting of the mind. And while breathing out, noticing the quieting of the mind. And the quieting is just the lawful effect of observing this activity with dispassion, noticing the pleasure of not being entangled, not having to react to the different thoughts and perceptions and feelings. And of course, there's a very real and subtle pleasure as this activity of mind begins to quiet. And when it's quiet enough, we can pick up the Buddha's ninth instruction while breathing in, experiencing the mind itself, the nature of the mind, the nature of the knowing mind, or you could say the space of the mind as you're breathing in, as you're breathing out. So here we're not interested, we're not paying attention to the activity of the mind, but sensing or intuiting the space of the mind itself, the space of the present moment itself. As if it's an inner treasure, this recognizing the beautiful simplicity of the knowing mind, the space of awareness. And in particular, to notice the peacefulness This peace of the knowing mind is inherent. You or I, we don't have to do something, or all we have to do is to recognize or be interested in this nature of the mind, this nature of the space of the present moment. Any thoughts, any sensations are there, but well into the background now. And if your eyes have been closed, just gently allow the eyes to open. See if you can even sustain this sense of the space of the present moment as you begin to adjust your posture, move, stretch a little maybe, whatever you need to do. Good, and we'll transition into the talk. First, let me say the internet here is not perfect, and I probably will freeze up from time to time for about 15 or 20 seconds, but it seems to come right back. So sorry about that. And I'll be teaching from IMS one more week next Sunday, and then I'll be back in Minnesota for most of November. Shelley will teach one of those Sundays in November, Shelley Graff. But I'll be in person in the building. So looking forward to seeing folks in another couple weeks. Those of you who are in the city center, and Ruth, who's hosting the Sunday morning program, and thanks to Jessica and Lucy, who are helping here with Lucy with the small groups at the end, and Jessica doing technology for us all. Really grateful for the support and for all of you showing up. It's really, I know it can sound a little, well, not for everyone to say it this way, but I really, even this strange Zoom world, hybrid world we exist in now, I really see it, sense it as a sacred space. And whether you're alone or whether you're with other folks right now, we're together. And what really brings us together is we have this shared intention around getting to know the nature of the heart and mind, the nature of experience, the nature of reality, and finding real value and connecting with the Buddha and the Buddhist teachings as a real support. And it's truly amazing that this articulation that comes from this person who lived 2,500 years ago, completely different time, completely different culture, that somehow that articulation is still functional and useful for us. So, so far away from that, his insights and his understanding and his attempt to articulate what his mind had come to understand. So I find that, a minor miracle that we can, that we can benefit these many years later. So a lot of you know we've studied the first tetrad, the first 4 instructions, which is really learning to bring this loving, wise attention to the physical body. And we use the breath as the anchor initially, and then widen it out to include the whole body, and then include the healing effect, which is that bodily well-being. It's sort of the natural, lawful result of the knowing mind being unafraid to be intimate and non-judging with the physical body, the sensations of the body. And so the calm comes not because our body's in perfect shape, we're young, vibrant, we've stretched, we got a good massage, and so our body feels really good. But that bodily well-being, that bodily calm comes because we've learned, we've trained awareness to be unafraid, to be intimate with the body, and to sense that subtle pleasure of being intimate, being beyond the need to judge, to fix. I'm not saying we never want to sort of turn our attention to the place in the body where there's pain and kind of peel back the layers and help that physical knot unwind, there's a place for that. But the point for these first 4 instructions is to access bodily calm, bodily well-being, because that allows the heart to trust the present moment in a deeper way, which makes the 5th instruction possible, where the Buddha invites us to breathe in and to sense joy, to get interested in joy. And joy here is that sense of the moment, of the experience of the moment, alive with change, alive with movement. Bodily sensations, sounds, sights are moving, thoughts, emotions, feelings, moving. Everything is moving. And wherever we sense that in our experience, we sense the lightness of the mind not imagining or imposing that it's fixed, it's solid, but we're sensing how alive the present moment is. Now remember, when we're practicing with this 5th step, breathing in, experiencing joy, breathing out, experiencing joy, it requires some confidence. If we don't have a little confidence, we're not going to be interested in joy, because we'll be arrogantly sure there's no joy. Why would I look for it? So we have to be, like, in order to be interested, there has to be some confidence that, having done the first 4 instructions well enough, not perfectly, have experienced enough of that bodily well-being, trusting the present moment enough, it just might be that the wisdom can sense the aliveness of the present moment, the movement, the fluttering, the vibration, the tingling, the vibrational quality, that something is alive here and now. And it might start very subtly, very faint, somewhere in our experience of the body and the mind. Just feel, and the joy is that joyful interest, like, wow. It's a sense of awe, a sense of wonder, a sense of how alive, how everything is happening on its own. And then the practice is keeping that particular quality that we call piti, or joy, in mind. As we breathe in, as we breathe out, we're going to want to pay attention to a lot of other things, but that's why it's a training. Can we keep joy in mind? And that's why I mentioned that for any of these steps, it might be useful at some point to use a little meditation word or phrase. Could be like, at this point, experiencing joy. And you repeat that silently in your mind as you're breathing in, experiencing joy, or just the word joy, or lightness, or whatever word for you is sort of a manifestation of your confidence that joy is available for human beings, even when the life is like this. Now, when circumstances are difficult, it just becomes harder to connect to this joy. So clearly, there are moments when joy will be more apparent and moments when it will be less apparent. But regardless, it's a good training, especially when we're learning the map. When we've learned the map, then when we practice, we don't have to always follow it in a linear way. But now we're learning it in this more linear way. And when we can keep joy in mind with the breath in and the breath going out, and enough confidence, joy has an effect in the mind. And so, in a sense, awareness steps away from kind of enmeshment and identification with the joy. It steps away and it notices sort of something wider, like, what effect has the joy had on the heart and mind? Oh, there's more of a willingness to trust. The heart and mind has more of a willingness to relax, to put down defensiveness, to put down a need to get somewhere, to become somebody. So a lot of those disrupting, disturbing effects of wanting, becoming, fixing, controlling get diminished through paying attention to joy. And then when we step back, because the next instruction, the Buddha says, one trains oneself while breathing in, experiencing that ease, sukha, that happiness of ease, that happiness of contentment as you're breathing in, as you're breathing out. So it's a more resonant happiness than the joy. The joy is brighter, may feel like there's a lot more energy, but it turns out that the happiness of ease, contentment, is a more profound or a more healing kind of happiness. And we want to keep that more refined happiness in mind while we breathe in, while we breathe out. And really let the pleasantness of sukha, of that inner happiness, that happiness of contentment, really let that pleasure have its effect on the mind. So then when we do the next step, so that's step 5 and 6 is the joy to the ease. Then step 7, we step away, or step, not away, but we step back from the beautiful quality of ease, the pleasurable ease. And then we're breathing in and we're experiencing the activity. Well, one of the activities will be that experience of ease. But now as we're breathing in, we're aware that that ease, that pleasure of the ease is something being known. So we're taking a more spacious look at the ease. It's just one aspect of mental activity. It's an important one. And it might even, if we've got some momentum, be the predominant experience there, the ease. But now we're aware, precisely because there is the pleasure of the ease, we can begin to explore this pleasure of being with mental activity without picking and choosing, without having a problem with mental activity. Just like we did in the earlier tetrad, step 3, where we were breathing in, experiencing the whole body. Now we're breathing in, experiencing all of the activity of mind. When we were experiencing the whole body, we were experiencing the activity of the body, the sensations, right? Now we're experiencing the kind of equivalent on the mental level, thoughts, feelings, feeling tone. And we're not picking and choosing, and we're not feeling like I gotta do some dharma move because the mental activity is this way or that way. I'm just aware of mental activity, even if it's bad mental activity, judging mind or condemning mind or whatever it might be. We're just noticing it as mental activity, skillful, unskillful, neutral, as we breathe in, as we breathe out. And the operative word here is dispassion. And it's really good to maybe transform how we normally might think of that word, dispassion, because it's really about, sometimes you've heard that phrase, maybe bare attention, where we're really intimate, we're really there, we're not distant, we're not detached, we're really intimate, but precisely the intimacy is dependent on the dispassion, like that awareness of mental activity exists because the mind that's knowing isn't entangled with the particular feeling tone, the particular pleasure, or the particular pain, or the particular perception, particular idea that's formed in the mind. It just knows it's just another thing in the forest of mental activity, just another thing that comes and goes lawfully, dependent on what's been set in motion in the mind. This is how, this is the activity of mind, in the same way that we had to learn to be okay with the activity of the body. Well, this is how the body is. It's just sensations coming and going, moving, intensifying, releasing. Same thing with mental activity and feeling tone and perceptions, just stuff happening. And this is really in a way, a life-changing insight. Sometimes comes on gradually over months and months of practice. sometimes in more sudden bursts. But basically, this shift where we realize mental activity doesn't have to be the demon, doesn't have to be the bad guy. It isn't a problem that there's mental activity, right? It's like that's that aspect of the mind, that's what it does. It just, there's an inherent restlessness to being a human being. You know, as long as we're alive, there's visual experience and auditory experience and smells and tastes and touches. The movement of physicality never ceases. And because we have sensitivity to mental activity, we realize there's also this very deep and wide river of mental activity that never ceases or rarely ceases. And when it ceases, it's really more that the attention is no longer attending either to the body or to mental activity. But it's really in the nature of this embodied existence that physicality and mentality move on ceaselessly. There's no ending to it. And that's okay, because we're realizing with this training, the 7th step, where we're breathing in, experiencing mental activity, breathing out, experiencing mental activity. And what's implied here in the Buddha's instruction is experiencing with dispassion, with that kind of spaciousness. Oh yeah, just mental activity being known. A despicable thought, a wholesome thought, a painful feeling tone, a pleasurable feeling tone, an interesting perception, a boring perception, just mental activity being known. And you can really see that earlier work of recognizing joy, recognizing ease, and just generally the pleasure of being present and the pleasure of not having, like, just allowing everything to be, right? We've learned to let the body be. Now we're learning to let mental activity be. That's also pleasurable. And that builds this confidence in the experience, this dispassionate way of being with mental activity. And lo and behold, this is what leads to the quieting of the mind. Breathing in, experiencing or calming. It's not so much that we're directly, as a practitioner, calming the mind, but we're noticing cause and effect here. The dispassionate, open, non-judging, non-controlling, non-fearful way of being with thoughts is, in fact, what lawfully quiets the thinking mind, evens out the feeling tone, more neutral, simplifies, quiets the thinking mind. And that's like a useful thing to know, because there are times when our mind, the thinking mind, is really oppressive, you know? And so it would be nice to know the lawful, guaranteed way to support the quieting of the thinking mind. Because our usual strategy is to think, why am I thinking so much? How could I make this stop? We think that thinking is the way to make stuff happen. But thinking too much is just more thinking, of course, and just adds to the stress. The stress of thinking is the identification with the thoughts. And that just turns out to also be the fuel for more mental activity. Being identified with mental activity is the cause for more mental activity. Being dispassionate with mental activity is the cause for the quieting of mental activity. And this is good to really memorize, so that when you do feel like your mind is obsessing in a way that's really unproductive and painful, and the compassion, self-compassion arises, I'd really like to do something that actually helps reduce this obsessiveness in the mind. you'll remember because you've memorized. Oh yeah, that's right. I remember the Buddhist teachings where he said that identifying, taking the mental activity personally is what feeds. But you're still identified with it in the sense of, I'm the one who has to stop doing this, as opposed to realizing this is just mental activity being known. And so this part of this insight, and it's really this training at step 7 rather, is really learning to step back. I mean, that's just a phrase. We don't actually step back. In a way, we're stepping in. We're getting more intimate. But there's a sense of distance, but that's really the wisdom that knows it's just mental activity being known. It creates that sense of dispassion, of space, but not the space like I've repressed thinking. Through force of will, I've made myself stop thinking, and so now there's no thinking going on. It's precisely because I don't need to do something with the thoughts, and also I don't need to get rid of the thoughts. It's that because of the confidence that comes from sensing the inner pleasure, that bodily well-being, the pleasure of joy, the pleasure of ease, the pleasure of seclusion, right? Then we're willing to observe mental activity in this wiser way. Oh yeah, it's just this activity. Perceptions, feeling tones, thoughts, whatever the mind's doing. It's just that activity being known. And then we start connecting the quieting with that dispassionate observation. And then that just reinforces, like knowing the mind is quieting and noticing the pleasure of a more quiet mind, the pleasure of simplicity really, then it just really matures in a beautiful way. And so in the next few weeks, we'll talk about the third tetrad, and I'll just mention a little bit about it now. And you probably remember, some of you have been studying the Buddha's 16 steps for his mindfulness of breathing instructions, the Anapanasati Sutta, which is just the Buddhist discourse on breathing in and breathing out. But of course, it's the whole path. It's not just about mindfulness of breathing. As I've often said, the breath is only in the forefront for the first few steps. Most of the 16 instructions are really working with more subtle aspects of our present moment experience, especially the nature of the mind itself. And that's where we're going now with the third group of 4 instructions. So this would be number 9, 10, 11, and 12. The third, what's called the third tetrad, the third group of 4 instructions. And the next 3 are really the same thing, but just in more steady, subtle ways. We're observing not the activity of the mind, but the space of the mind itself, the space of the knowing mind, the space of the present moment. Not the activity of the body, not the activity of the mind, but what is not those 2 things? Well, there's just one thing left, right? There's 3 things you could say in the present moment. There's activity of the body, that by that we mean the 5 physical senses, seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching, being known. There's that activity. There's the activity of thought. Generally, we talk about that as perceptions and feeling tones and mental formations or mental constructions, thoughts, right? And then there's the knowing, or the space. And it's, words are going to be imperfect with the third tetrad. So whether you call it the space of the conscious mind, or the space of the knowing mind, or awareness, or the space of the present moment, a lot of us find the word space a useful concept to help get a sense, you could say, to help intuit because we know this space and eventually learn to trust it and abide, concentrate, and liberate it. Not so much directly, like, we can directly bring awareness to a sensation in the body. We can directly bring awareness to a thought, even a thought being much more ephemeral than a sensation or a sound or a sight. But still, we can be aware of a particular thought. I can even make my mind repeat the thought, having the thought, this talk's going to be over soon. I can redo that thought and I can observe, oh, this is what a thought is. This is that thought being known. But awareness, the space of awareness, the space of the mind itself, we can intuit it, we can sense it, but it isn't as easily grasped in a way. I mean, we can grasp the idea of the mind, the idea of the empty, still, peaceful, spacious mind. We could probably write a 400-page book, right? If we grasp the idea, we could just do riffs on the idea of the mind. But what we're interested in the third tetrad is a direct knowing, a direct experiencing, a direct abiding with, intuiting, resting with the mind, the heart, the present moment. So just to review before we end, because this is where we'll go in the next weeks, the Buddha says, while breathing in, breathing out, we're experiencing the mind, we're gladdening the mind, we're concentrating, stilling the mind, purifying even. And then the last of this third tetrad is liberating the mind. Or you could say releasing the mind. Because the mind has in its nature no grip. The mind isn't in its nature dependent on anything. And so with this next study, using these next 4 trainings to experience, to gladden, to concentrate, and to release the mind. That's the training now for the third tetrad. To realize or to recognize the space of the mind, to gladden it, appreciate it, notice its peacefulness, to bring that peacefulness to its sort of most refined peacefulness. That's the concentration piece. And to liberate it. And to liberate it is, or to release it, it's kind of like the way I might think of this, of course, intellectually, because we're using words now, but we're realizing the mind that's not dependent on anything, not grasping, unfixed. So we're realizing that mind that's free of any fixation, any grasping, any idea of somebody having a peaceful mind. And it's a deep insight or learning about the nature of the mind. Because we don't really understand our experience as a human being without fixations, like being fixed unconsciously often, fixed with the idea that I'm here having my experience. We don't realize all the ways the mind is bound. So when we do the 4 instructions, the trainings with the third tetrad, experiencing the mind, gladdening the mind, concentrating the mind, which is really refining the peacefulness of non-grasping, and then realizing this mind is empty of selfing, empty of any fixed idea of self. There's no location for this mind. There's no fixedness for this mind. And that's a particular experience to see the mind in that way. It feels free, unbound. And then when we get to the 4th tetrad later in the fall, or maybe even in January, we'll see. But when we get to the 4th tetrad, it's really deepening that insight that arises, maturing that insight, integrating that insight that arises in the third tetrad, the beginnings of it in the third tetrad. Let me read a little from a couple sources before we end our time today. I put in the chat, and maybe Jessica, you could re-put the document. But one of the new readings there is from Andy Olendzki, a wonderful Buddhist scholar, was the executive director and scholar at the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies for many years. Still does quite a bit of teaching online. And this is a nice article that you can read because it's in this document. And those of you who are live streaming or listening to this later, you can always find this document, this Google Doc, on the calendar event for this Sunday morning program. So when you look at the Common Ground Meditation Center's calendar, where you find the link, the Zoom link for this program, you also find the link for this Google Doc that we have in the chat right now for people. And it's called, the article by Andy Olendzki or Andrew Olendzki, Keep It Simple, The Gift of Awareness. And he wrote it for Tricycle magazine back in 2014. So let me just read a couple paragraphs. Knowing as an event does not belong, knowing that the event does not belong to anyone or need to be constrained by the thinking of thoughts, this is an alien idea for many in the modern world, because so much of our mental activity consists of thoughts, images, concepts, and words. It seems inconceivable that the mind might manifest in powerful ways devoid of thought. Yet you can feel this for yourself, so to speak, here and now. It might take some practice and 20 minutes of letting go of one thing after another, but the simple experience. Like the dimmest of stars in a night sky, it slips away if you try to pin it down. But if you learn to release hold of the clutter and pry the mind out of the grooves and channels in which it is accustomed to run, you can feel it spilling out and spreading formlessly in other directions. And so what Andy is talking about here is really steps 7 and 8, where we're learning to be aware of mental activity with dispassion. Comes now into the foreground, and wisdom is naturally going to be interested in it, is the sense of space of the mind, or space of the present moment. And there's another paragraph I wanted to read here. The senses is no longer of great interest, right? So we have 6 senses, the 5 physical, and then the sensitivity to mental activity. So he's saying the mind's less and less interested in what's coming through these 6 sense gates, and serves merely as a support for something far more captivating, the quality of knowing. And Andy continues writing, awareness itself becomes the most compelling object of awareness. This simple knowing, so peaceful, so clear, so open, seems diminished by and even wasted upon the narrow confines of mere thoughts. As the thinking about things is gradually squeezed out of the mind by filling the senses with awareness, and as each experience is allowed to flow through the point of focus without obstruction, we begin to get a glimpse of a profound simplicity. Everything is changing, everything is interdependent, and there is no one to whom any of it belongs. And this is that peacefulness, that third step in the third tetrad. He goes on just a little bit more here. This awareness is nothing special, it's natural. In fact, it may be the most natural, the only natural thing there is. There is no need to magnify it by saying it permeates the quantum soup of the cosmos, or to cast it beyond time by calling it primordial or eternal. That is just the proliferation talking, right? Just more thinking. And he writes, if anything, it feels radically embodied, excruciatingly fragile, and entirely contingent. If a tiny microbe goes awry, or if some strand of genetic material gets misread, or even if you delay the in-breath by a few seconds, it can all fall apart in a blink of an eye. This too is just another story. Let's see if we can keep it simple. If we have to call it anything, let's call it a gift and leave it at that. So I'll go ahead and repost the document in case people didn't get a chance who are here now. And you can open that up and find the link to Andy's article. And there's a link to maybe 10 or 12 other articles that we've been studying since we started this study of the Buddhist teachings on Anapanasati. So this is just the latest article that I've posted there. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to mention that Common Ground, this city center we have, and the online community that we have, and our retreat center in Western Wisconsin that we have, all of the goodness of our Dharma community has come about because of the generosity of so many of you. And so we don't talk too often about how the center works, but it is an important spiritual teaching to understand the circle of dana. Dana sometimes gets translated as generosity, but it's really something more real than these ideas we sometimes have of generosity. It's this way of participating where we learn how to receive what comes our way freely, and we learn how to give everything away in a way that makes sense in our lives. No one can tell us how much to contribute and whether to contribute money or to volunteer time or just to have our good wishes sent to everyone involved. It's really for us to figure out what makes us come alive and what supports my life and leads to happiness. And so we just invite everybody to come into relationship together with each other, with the center, with the teachers. And in that way, now for almost 30 years, Common Ground has been able to function and support the livelihood of the teachers and our paid office staff, and our two buildings, one in Minneapolis and one in Western Wisconsin, with our retreat center now coming online. So if you have any questions, just contact the center. And in that document is also the link if you want to go donate now. But there's any number of ways to get involved to make this place continue to happen. And so in just a moment, I'll pass it on to Lucy, who will organize the online groups, and Ruth will organize the groups at the city center today. And people are always invited to stay for 15 minutes to have a group of 3 or 4 get together and have a conversation about some of the topics. Like one of the interesting things to talk about today is just your experience of dispassion and maybe your mistrust of the idea of dispassion. And just that ability we have to step back and create more space in the moment, because that's the beginning of understanding dispassion. But of course, anything goes in those small groups. Everyone gets a chance to speak, no crosstalk, just share for 2 minutes, give or take. Then after everyone's had a chance to share, then it's just open conversation time. Any Sunday, you're welcome to stay for those small groups if you're here on Zoom or if you're in the building. Otherwise, I'll say goodbye to everybody. Hope to see you next week. Wishing you a good week of practice. And Lucy, I'll pass it on, the hosting duties on to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sun.
Thank you, Lucy. And thank you, Jessica, for helping. Yeah, I forgot to shut off the YouTube. Would you do that, Lucy? Just go up to the top there and